You think a school is a place to learn fairness and respect. For Danielle Maras, a respected English teacher in a quiet suburban high school, that belief was shattered in a single afternoon. What began as a routine class turned into a battle that would cost her career, drag her into a brutal legal fight, and uncover a truth the school board had fought to bury for years. She stood up for a black student being targeted in plain sight and paid the ultimate price. This story will make you question how far power can go to silence the truth. So stay with me until the end, and if stories like this matter to you, hit like, subscribe, and let's dive in. The clock in room 114 ticked with a steady rhythm, almost in sync with the muffled hum of the school's old heating system. Outside, the late autumn sky hung heavy with clouds, casting a dim, soft light through the half-closed blinds. It was one of those afternoons when the air felt still, as if time had slowed down. Danielle Maras stood at the front of the classroom, leaning one hand on the edge of her desk, the other holding a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She had taught this novel for years, but it never stopped feeling important. She believed in the story's lessons, fairness, empathy, courage in the face of injustice, not just as literature, but as something every student should carry out of her classroom into the real world. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. She read aloud, her voice even but resonant, letting each word settle before moving on. A few heads were bent over notebooks, jotting down quotes. Others just listened, some with genuine interest, others with that half-aware glaze that crept in during the last period of the day. Near the middle row, Jamal Carter sat quietly, his hands folded on his desk. Danielle had noticed him since the first week of the semester. The way he spoke only when called on, the way his eyes scanned the room before raising his hand, as if measuring whether it was safe. He was polite, soft-spoken, and one of only 3 black students in the entire sophomore class. Danielle often wondered if he felt the weight of that every day. The second hand on the clock swept past the 9. 10 minutes left until the bell. Danielle flipped to the next page and kept reading. The scene in the book had shifted, courtroom tension, a man's fate hanging in the balance, the kind of scene that always made the room go still. And then it happened. From the back row came a low chuckle. It was quiet at first, but sharp enough to cut through the air. Danielle didn't break rhythm, waiting to see if it would fade. But it didn't. A voice, careless, smug, spoke just loud enough for the people around him to hear, but not so loud that he thought it would carry to the front. Of course Jamal likes this part. It's about his kind. The words slid through the room like a blade. A couple of students snickered. One girl's eyes went wide. Jamal froze. His fingers curled slightly on the desk, and his gaze dropped to the page in front of him. Danielle stopped reading, slowly, deliberately. She closed the book and set it down on the desk, the sound of its spine hitting the wood echoing in the stillness. Her eyes locked on the source, Tyler Grayson. Broad shoulders, Letterman jacket, football star, the kind of student who never seemed to face real consequences. His father had been on the school board for years. Care to repeat that, Tyler? Danielle's voice was steady, but there was a weight behind it that made the room tighten. Tyler leaned back in his chair, smirking. Just a joke, Ms. Maras. No big deal, no big deal. Danielle took a step closer. Tell me, what part of reducing someone to a stereotype is a joke? A few students shifted uncomfortably. One boy coughed. No one answered. Tyler shrugged, playing the part of the unbothered teenager. Didn't mean anything by it. You meant enough to say it out loud, she replied, her tone sharper now. And you said it knowing exactly who you were talking to. She glanced briefly at Jamal, who still hadn't looked up. We don't joke about someone's race in this classroom. Not here. Not ever. The silence that followed was thick. Tyler muttered something that might have been sorry, but it was laced with defiance. Danielle let the pause linger before she turned and walked back to the front. She picked up the book again, but her mind was no longer in the courtroom of Macomb, Alabama. It was here, in this room, with the knowledge that calling out a Grayson meant trouble. She knew the politics of this school. She knew how power worked here. And as she read the next line of the novel, she could already feel the shift in the air. By the time the final bell rang, She had the unsettling sense that this was not the end of the incident, but the beginning. And she was right. The hallway smelled like pencil shavings and cafeteria coffee. Between classes, it pulsed with noise, lockers slamming, laughter, footsteps rushing like a tide. Danielle stepped into it with her mind still back in room 114, replaying Tyler's smirk, Jamal's hunched shoulders, the sharp silence that followed. She told herself to breathe. She told herself to file an incident report, talk to the office, follow the rule book to the letter. Because when power gets involved, the only protection you have is paper. Ms. Morris, the guidance counselor, Elena Park, intercepted her near the stairwell, a tablet pressed against her chest. Elena's face was concerned, the kind of concern that could mean real empathy or damage control. Heard there was a disruption. Disruption. Danielle repeated, the word tasting sour. I corrected a student who made a racially disparaging comment. That's not a disruption, that's my job. Elena's eyes flicked past Danielle's shoulder, as if checking who might be within earshot. Let's talk in my office, she said softly. Inside, the counselor's office was tidy, comforting, even soft lamplight, a plant in the corner, motivational posters that sounded right in theory and flimsy in practice. Elena closed the door, then sat on the edge of her chair. Tyler came to see me right after the bell, she said carefully. He felt singled out, said he was embarrassed in front of the class. Good, Danielle answered, surprising herself with the honesty of it. If you insult someone, you should be embarrassed. Elena pressed her lips together. Look, I get it, I do. But we have to be mindful of optics. Danielle blinked. Optics, parents, the board. The climate is tense right now. Elena lowered her voice. Tyler's father called the principal within minutes. He's furious. I just want you to be prepared. Prepared. That was the word they always used right before they asked you to make yourself smaller. Danielle kept her voice level. I'll be filing a formal incident report, and I'd like Jamal to have support on record. Elena nodded. I'll make a note. Her fingers hovered over the tablet, then paused. Would you consider phrasing it as a classroom misunderstanding that you de-escalated? It could help ease. No, Danielle said. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a racist comment. Call it what it is. For a moment, Elena's expression cracked relief, respect. But then it smoothed into professional neutrality. Okay. I'll send you the documentation template. Danielle thanked her and left before the courage in her chest started shaking. By lunch, the story had mutated. In the faculty lounge, whispers snapped like static. A history teacher looked up from his salad. Heard you went after one of the football boys. A chuckle from the math department chair. Brave woman. Or reckless. Danielle ignored them and made a beeline for the microwave. Inside, her leftover soup spun in slow circles. She watched it like it might tell the future. Ms. Morris, the voice behind her made her turn. Jamal stood at the doorway, backpack slung across one shoulder, chewing the inside of his cheek. He wasn't supposed to be in the lounge, but the way he hovered there half in, half out made Danielle's heart tighten. Hey, Jamal, she said softly, stepping outside with him. The hallway here was quieter, the hum of the soda machine filling the space between them. You okay? I'm fine. He gave a small shrug, eyes still on the floor. I've heard worse. The casual truth of it gnawed at her. You shouldn't have to hear any of it, Danielle said. What happened in class was not okay. I'm filing a report. If you want, we can write your statement together. Jamal's gaze finally lifted. There was gratitude there, and a weariness far too old for his age. If I say something, it's just gonna make it worse. Worse how? He hesitated. You know how. People talk. Coaches hear. Teachers forget to call on you. It gets around. He managed a half smile. I just want to pass sophomore year without being a story. Danielle swallowed. You're not a story. You're a person. But I hear you. If you want to keep your name off the record, I can still document what happened. He nodded. Thanks. Then, almost as an afterthought, you didn't have to say anything, Ms. Morris. I know that. I did, she said. That's the point. He gave a real smile, then small, quick, and disappeared into the river of students. By last period, Danielle had crafted the incident report with the precision of a surgeon. She wrote down the time, the quote word for word, the reactions in the room, her response, and her follow-up conversation with the counselor. She attached a note recommending restorative action for the class, a meeting with Jamal if he consented, and a disciplinary conference with Tyler. She CC'd the principal, the vice principal Elena, and HR. At 3:17 p.m., she hit send. At 3:25 p.m., an email pinged back from the vice principal, Ms. Ellison. Thank you for your diligence, Ms. Morris. We take classroom climate very seriously. Please refrain from engaging further with the student in question until we've completed our review. We'll be in touch with next steps. It was the kind of message that looked supportive from a distance and cold from up close. Danielle stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Please refrain from engaging. With whom? The student who did harm or the one who was harmed? She closed the laptop. On her way out, she passed Tyler in the corridor. His laughter was loud, performative, a spotlight he turned on himself. When he saw her, the laughter didn't dim. He just looked at her and smiled like they shared a private joke. It made her skin prickle. Ms. Morris, he said, stepping into her path. Just so you know, my dad says this is all being blown out of proportion. People say stuff every day. Doesn't mean anything. Words mean everything, she replied. Especially when they're used to push someone down. He smirked. You'll see. The next morning, the school resource officer was parked conspicuously outside the main office. His presence an unsubtle message. Danielle signed in, feeling eyes on her. She told herself it didn't matter. She had the report. She had the truth. And she had the book on her desk to remind her why she did this work in the first place. Third period. A summons slipped under her door. Meeting with administration. 11:15 a.m. The paper was crisp. The font was polite. Her stomach dropped anyway. In the conference room, the principal, Dr. Henley, sat at the head of the table, posture straight, hands folded like a judge. Ms. Ellison was to her right, scrolling through emails on a tablet. Elena sat on the left, eyes down, notepad ready. Ms. Morris, Dr. Henley began, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We appreciate your prompt reporting. Danielle nodded. My concern is Jamal's well-being and the learning environment. As is ours, Dr. Henley said smoothly. However, we've spoken with Tyler, and he maintains it was a joke taken out of context. Several students corroborate that there was laughter, but not the exact wording. I wrote the exact wording in my report, Danielle said. I heard it. Jamal heard it. Others did, too. They're just afraid to contradict him, Mr. Ellison cleared his throat. We want to avoid escalating a situation that could divide the school community. Danielle stared at him. Naming racism isn't what divides us. Pretending it didn't happen does. A flicker crossed Dr. Henley's face. Annoyance. Calculation. We are considering a restorative circle for the class, she said. But we also need to address the manner in which you handled the incident. Publicly calling out a student can be seen as punitive. It was a boundary, Danielle replied. A necessary one, Elena spoke up, carefully. Maybe there's a way to acknowledge harm without assigning blame. There was harm, Danielle said. And there was a person who caused it. If we can't say that, what exactly are we teaching? Silence settled like dust. Dr. Henley finally nodded, as if closing a file. We'll follow up in writing. In the meantime, please refrain from discussing this matter with other staff. We want to minimize rumor. The meeting ended with the soft scrape of chairs and the unspoken message that Danielle was now on a list. Back in her classroom, she found a folded note on her desk. No name, just blocky handwriting. Stop making trouble or you'll lose your job. It could have been anyone. It could have been everyone. Danielle slipped the note into a folder with the report. More paper, more proof, the only armor she had. That afternoon, she tried to teach, but the room felt altered, the air thinner, the lights harsher. Jamal kept his gaze on the desk. Tyler's friends were louder than usual, performative in their innocence. Every time Danielle called on a student, she felt the weight of invisible eyes asking if she was fair, if she was biased, if she was the problem. When the bell rang, she stayed seated, letting the scrape of chairs fade into quiet. She pressed her palms flat against the desk and remembered her first year teaching. When she thought courage would be celebrated in schools the way it was in books, she knew better now. Courage cost. At 4:02 p.m., the follow-up email arrived. After review, the administration has determined that the incident in question was a misunderstanding exacerbated by classroom dynamics. We recommend that you attend a professional development session on de-escalation and non-confrontational classroom management. Disciplinary action for the student is not warranted at this time. We will schedule a restorative activity at our discretion. Please acknowledge receipt. Danielle read it twice, then a third time. Misunderstanding. The word crawled across the screen like a stain. She typed back with measured fingers, I acknowledge receipt. I disagree with the characterization of the incident and remain concerned for the student who was targeted. I request that this response be added to the file. She hit send. She was packing her bag when Jamal appeared in the doorway again, hovering like a question. They talked to me, he said quietly. Asked if I wanted to, move past it. I said I just want to learn without dealing with that stuff. And Danielle asked. They said I'm resilient. He made a face. I hate that word. Me too, she said. It's what people call you when they don't want to remove the thing you have to be resilient about. He nodded, absorbing that. You in trouble? She paused. I don't know yet. He took a breath, then straightened like a decision had clicked into place. For what it's worth, thanks for saying something. Even if it makes them mad, some things are worth the anger, Danielle said. He left, and the room felt bigger in his absence, like the walls had stepped back to give her choices. She looked at the folder on her desk, the report, the note, the emails. Paper armor, thin but still armor. On her drive home, rain spit across the windshield, a slow drizzle that blurred the world into watercolor. The wipers beat a metronome for the thoughts she couldn't quiet. She knew this would escalate. People like Tyler didn't take kindly to losing face. People like his father didn't accept the idea that their sons could be wrong. And schools like this polished hallways, smiling brochures preferred peace over truth every time. But somewhere underneath the fear and the dread, something else stirred. A line from the book echoed in her head. Real courage is when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway and see it through no matter what. She turned the heater up and gripped the wheel. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next morning began like any other, at least, from the outside. The same fluorescent buzz filled the hallways. The same scent of burnt coffee drifted from the teacher's lounge. Students still dragged their feet toward lockers, yawning into their sleeves. But for Danielle, every step into the building carried a heavier weight. She could feel it in the way conversations lowered when she passed, in the glances traded between staff who pretended to be busy with papers. News traveled faster in schools than in any newsroom by now. Every teacher, custodian, and lunch lady knew she had confronted one of the untouchables in class. She stopped by her mailbox in the main office. Inside was a single envelope, unmarked, the paper rough against her fingers. She glanced around, but the secretaries were absorbed in morning calls and attendance sheets. She tore it open. You should learn to mind your own business. No signature. No explanation needed. Danielle folded the note and slid it into the growing file in her bag. More proof. More paper armor. Her first 2 periods passed quietly, but the quiet felt performative, like the calm before a fire alarm. Students sat straighter than usual, laughed a little too loudly at safe jokes, and avoided looking at Jamal. Danielle caught him glancing toward Tyler twice, then quickly away. Tyler, for his part, lounged back in his chair, oozing the confidence of someone who believed the system bent toward him. During 3rd period, the principal's voice came over the intercom. Ms. Morris, please send Jamal Carter to the main office. Every head turned to Jamal. He froze mid-note, eyes darting to Danielle. She gave him a small nod, the kind that meant go ahead, but I'm not letting this drop. The door closed behind him, and Danielle felt the shift immediately, students relaxing, conversations sparking back to life. She wanted to ask what was so threatening about Jamal's presence that his absence made the room breathe easier. She already knew the answer. It wasn't until lunch that she saw him again. He was leaning against the vending machine outside the cafeteria, staring at the floor. They talked to me, he said as she approached. Asked if I wanted to put this behind us. Danielle's jaw tightened. And what did you say? I said I just want to go to class without people making comments. They said I'm resilient. He rolled his eyes. Like that's supposed to make it okay. It's what they call you when they don't want to fix the thing you have to be resilient about. Danielle replied. For the first time that day, Jamal smiled. Yeah, that's exactly it. She was about to head back to her room when a voice cut through the hall. Ms. Morris, it was Rebecca Chen, the AP history teacher. Sharp eyes, sharper tongue, and a reputation for steering clear of controversy, at least in public. She caught up with Danielle, lowering her voice. I heard what happened, Rebecca said. And for what it's worth, you were right to call it out. Most people wouldn't have. Danielle blinked. I thought you didn't get involved in these kinds of things. I don't, Rebecca admitted. But I've had Jamal in class. He's a good kid. And I've seen Tyler's behavior before. This isn't new. She glanced around. They'll protect him, you know. His father's money keeps the sports program afloat. I know, Danielle said. Rebecca hesitated. If they try to railroad you, I'll testify to what I've seen. I don't like bullies, even when they wear varsity jackets. Danielle felt something she hadn't all week: unexpected solidarity. Thank you, she said quietly. Rebecca's gaze hardened. Don't thank me yet. If you go up against them, you're going to find out who your friends really are. By the end of the day, the first crack in the administration's armor appeared. An email from apparent Jamal's mother landed in Danielle's inbox. Ms. Morris, Jamal told me what you did in class. Thank you for standing up for him. I want you to know you have our support. If you need me to speak to the principal, I will. Danielle read it twice. It was the kind of message that could be a lifeline or a spark for a much bigger fire. She typed back, thank you. I may take you up on that. As she hit send, she realized the decision had already been made. She wasn't going to let this fade quietly. And if the school wanted to treat her as the problem, then she was going to show them exactly how big a problem she could be. The defense she had given Jamal in that moment wasn't going to end in room 214. It was just getting started. The following Monday began with a faculty meeting, the kind that looked routine on paper but felt anything but. The email had come late Friday afternoon. All staff, mandatory attendance. 7:15 a.m., Media Center, no topic listed. No agenda attached. Danielle walked in to find the principal, Dr. Henley, standing near the projector screen, arms folded loosely in that practiced posture of authority. Mr. Ellison, the vice principal, sat off to the side, scrolling on his tablet. A few teachers chatted quietly, but the tone was subdued. People knew, or they suspected. Good morning, everyone, Dr. Henley began as the last chairs scraped into place. Her voice was smooth, but Danielle heard the edge under it, the kind of tone that said this is about control, not collaboration. I want to remind everyone, Henley continued, about the importance of fostering a positive climate and avoiding actions that might escalate tensions between students or between staff and students. Danielle sat straighter, the subtext ringing loud and clear. Henley clicked to the first slide, conflict de-escalation in the classroom. Stock photos of smiling students filled the screen. When incidents arise, she said, our role is to model calm, respectful dialogue. We must avoid singling out any student in a way that could be perceived as punitive or shaming. A few heads nodded. Some stared at their coffee. No one spoke. Danielle's jaw tightened. This isn't about de-escalation, she thought. This is about burying what happened. When the meeting ended, Rebecca Chen brushed past her. That was for you, she murmured, not looking up. Henley might as well have put your name on the slides. I noticed, Danielle replied. Later that morning, she was summoned to the principal's office again. Inside, the blinds were half drawn, stripes of pale light cutting across the desk. Dr. Henley gestured for her to sit, but didn't smile this time. We've completed our review of the classroom exchange, Henley said, pausing deliberately on the word exchange, as if it softened what had happened. As I mentioned before, several accounts differ from yours, and Jamal has chosen not to pursue any further action. Danielle leaned forward. Because he doesn't want to be targeted. That doesn't make the original comment disappear. Henley's gaze hardened. We have to balance the needs of all students, Ms. Morris. That includes the accused, Danielle repeated. This isn't a criminal trial. It's a question of right and wrong. And we're teaching everyone in this building that the right thing to do is stay silent if it makes someone uncomfortable. Henley clasped her hands. I'm advising you, for your own benefit, to let this matter rest. Focus on your teaching. Don't let one incident derail your career. The threat was subtle, but it was there, hanging in the air between them. That afternoon, Danielle received another email, this one marked confidential. Effective immediately. Please refrain from communicating with parents or guardians regarding the recent classroom incident. All inquiries will be handled by administration. Deviation from this protocol will be considered insubordination. It was an unmistakable move to isolate her from allies. But what they didn't know was that she had already printed every email, every note, every version of the story they'd tried to sanitize. The folder in her bag was getting heavier, and so was her resolve. After the last bell, she walked out to the parking lot under a gray, swollen sky. A few yards away, Jamal's mother was waiting by her car. She waved Danielle over. I talked to the principal, she said without preamble. She told me it was handled. That's what she said, handled. I asked if Tyler apologized to my son, and she said that wasn't necessary. Danielle felt heat rise in her chest. They don't want this to get any bigger. Well, I do, Jamal's mother said firmly. If they think they can sweep this under the rug, they're wrong. And if you're willing to stand up, I'll stand with you. Danielle glanced toward the school, its windows glowing dimly against the darkening clouds. Then we're going to need to be careful, she said. Careful, but not quiet. The retaliation didn't come with slammed doors or shouted threats. It arrived in quiet, calculated moves, the kind you could almost mistake for coincidence if you weren't paying attention. The first was a schedule change. On Tuesday morning, Danielle opened her email to find a terse message from Mr. Ellison, effective immediately. Your third period English class will be moved to room 109 due to facility optimization. Room 109 was in the basement, windowless, cramped, and so close to the boiler room that the pipes rattled whenever the heat kicked on. Her students would lose 5 minutes each way just navigating the stairs and narrow hallways. She knew exactly what this was. Keep her isolated. Make teaching harder. Wear her down. The second came as a random classroom observation. Halfway through her lesson on Wednesday, the door swung open and in walked Mrs. Knox from HR, clipboard in hand. No warning. No smile. Just a seat in the back and the scratch of a pen. Danielle carried on, but she could feel the evaluation like a weight on her shoulders. Tyler sat in the second row, grinning as if he were in on the joke. Jamal kept his head down, scribbling notes furiously, maybe to avoid becoming part of whatever Knox was here to collect. After class, Knox left without a word. An hour later, Danielle received an email, observation complete. Concerns noted regarding classroom tone and overemphasis on sensitive topics. Overemphasis. That was their way of saying stop talking about racism. By Thursday, the petty punishments had multiplied. Her request for new classroom copies of a novel was under review. Her parking spot was reassigned to a new faculty member, a 20-something who'd started 3 months ago. The copier near her room malfunctioned every time she tried to use it, but mysteriously worked fine for others. None of it was enough to warrant an official complaint on its own. But together, they formed a steady drip of hostility meant to push her toward quitting. That afternoon, Rebecca Chen slipped into the basement room during Danielle's prep period. She closed the door and leaned against it. They're building a case, Rebecca said quietly. I've seen this before. They'll make a list of performance concerns, so if you push this to the board or the press, they can say you were already under review. Danielle rubbed her temples. They're not even subtle about it. They don't need to be, Rebecca replied. Most teachers won't fight back. Too much to lose. Danielle met her gaze. And what about you? You going to keep helping me once this gets ugly? Rebecca hesitated. I'll tell the truth if they ask me directly. But I have to be careful. My job. She trailed off, eyes apologetic. Danielle nodded slowly. She didn't blame her, but it stung all the same. At the end of the week, another note appeared in her mailbox, This one in block capitals, scrawled with a marker, "Your next." It had no envelope, no signature, no pretense. Danielle stared at it for a long time before sliding it into her now bursting folder of evidence. If they thought intimidation would shut her up, they had miscalculated badly. Because now, it wasn't just about defending Jamal. It was about defending herself and exposing exactly how far this school would go to protect its own. It happened faster than Danielle imagined. Friday morning began like any other. She was halfway through setting up her lesson plans when the intercom crackled. "Ms. Morris, please report to the principal's office immediately." The tone was clipped, formal, not the usual "please stop by when you get a chance." She walked the hallway in a tunnel of whispers. Students parted around her like she was contagious. A few teachers avoided eye contact altogether. Rebecca wasn't in her room. The door was closed, lights off. When Danielle entered the office, Dr. Henley was already seated at the long conference table, papers neatly stacked in front of her. Mer. Ellison sat at her side, eyes unreadable. Rest Mrs. Knox was there too, her clipboard resting like a loaded weapon in her lap. "Ms. Morris," Henley began, "we've concluded our review of your recent conduct. Unfortunately, we've documented several incidents that demonstrate a pattern of poor judgment and failure to maintain a neutral, supportive classroom environment." Danielle's pulse thudded in her ears. "This is about Tyler's comment." Henley didn't blink. "This is about your response to that comment. Your actions have created division among students and disrupted the learning climate." "That's not division, that's accountability," Danielle shot back. Knox slid a sheet of paper across the table. "Notice of termination, effective immediately." Danielle stared at the words. "You're firing me for defending a student against racism." Henley's tone stayed maddeningly even. "We're terminating you for insubordination, unprofessional conduct, and repeated disregard for administrative directives. You'll have the opportunity to appeal this decision through the district's grievance process." She almost laughed. "You mean the same district that's been covering for this family for years?" Ellison shifted in his chair. "Ms. Morris, we'd like you to collect your personal belongings now. A security officer will escort you." The walk back to her classroom felt like something out of a slow-motion film. Students lined the hallway watching. A few whispered. Some just stared openly. When she reached room 109, Officer Ramirez, kind-faced but visibly uncomfortable, was already there, waiting to escort her. "You don't have to do this," she told him. "Orders," he said softly. Danielle packed her books, the framed photo of her parents, and most importantly, the thick folder of emails, notes, and reports she had been collecting. She slid it into her tote like it was gold. As she zipped her bag, Jamal appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his voice barely above a whisper. "They said you're not coming back." "They're right," Danielle said. "But this isn't the end." He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her, quick, awkward, but real. "Thank you," he murmured. When she walked out for the last time, Jamal stood in the doorway, watching her go. The escort took her past the main office, where Henley pretended to be absorbed in a phone call. Parents waiting for appointments glanced up, eyes flicking from Danielle to the officer at her side. The shame they wanted her to feel burned on her skin, but underneath it, there was steel. Because she wasn't going home to lick her wounds. She was going home to call a lawyer. The news traveled faster than Danielle could dial her lawyer's number. By the time she reached her driveway that afternoon, her phone was already buzzing nonstop. Texts from fellow teachers, emails from parents, even a few social media notifications she hadn't yet dared to open. Rebecca Chen had sent a single line. "They're telling staff you were removed for safety reasons." Danielle sat in her car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process the gall of it. Safety reasons, as if she were the danger. That evening, she opened her laptop and finally checked Facebook. The local community group page was on fire. A parent had posted, "Does anyone know why Ms. Morris was escorted out of the high school today? My daughter said it had to do with her defending a student from a racist comment." Dozens of replies had already piled up. Some were furious. "If this is true, our district has some explaining to do. Ms. Morris is one of the best teachers my kid ever had." Others were dismissive, clearly parroting the school's spin. You don't know the whole story. There are two sides to everything. The thread had become a battleground. The next morning, Danielle's lawyer, Marisol Vega, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on messy cases, called her. "I've already had 3 parents reach out to me," Marisol said. "And I'm getting the sense that the administration's narrative is creative." "That's one way to put it," Danielle replied. "They're claiming you created a hostile learning environment," Marisol continued. "And they're using vague phrases like escalated tensions and compromised safety. That's code for we don't want to admit this is about race." Danielle exhaled slowly. "What do? We build your case," Marisol said. "And we let the community know the truth. But once we go public, there's no going back. You ready for that?" Danielle didn't hesitate. "I've been ready since the day I filed that report." By Monday, word had reached the students. Several of Danielle's former classes began showing up to school in black shirts, a silent protest they organized over group chats. Some carried handmade signs, "We stand with Ms. Morris, no justice, no learning." Jamal walked at the front of one group, head high despite the glares from certain staff members. The school tried to shut it down quickly. Dr. Henley issued a statement over the PA. "While we respect students' right to express themselves, disruptions to the learning environment will not be tolerated." But the students didn't stop. Videos of their march through the halls hit TikTok and Instagram within hours, racking up thousands of views. That afternoon, Marisol sent Danielle a screenshot of a post from Jamal's mother. "My son was the student Ms. Morris defended. I've been quiet until now, but I want everyone to know she told the truth. The administration failed to protect my child. Instead, they punished the one person who stood up for him." The comments were flooded with support. Other parents began sharing their own stories, small incidents of bias that had been brushed aside, complaints that went nowhere. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. And yet, the district doubled down. A press release went out that evening, claiming the departure of Ms. Morris was unrelated to any specific student incident and was based solely on professional conduct concerns. Danielle stared at the statement on her screen, feeling both rage and a strange sense of relief. They were lying so boldly now that anyone paying attention could see it. The school wanted this to fade. The community wasn't going to let it. Danielle's dining table no longer looked like a place to eat. It was now a war room. Stacks of manila folders covered the surface, each labeled in thick black marker: emails, witness statements, incident reports, retaliation evidence. Her laptop sat open in the center, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen, meticulously tracking every date, time, and detail from the first day Tyler made that comment to the moment she was escorted out. Marisol Vega sat across from her, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on her nose. "This isn't just wrongful termination," she said, flipping through a folder. "It's retaliation for reporting discrimination. And if we can prove a pattern in the district, we can go bigger: civil rights violation, hostile work environment, maybe even federal attention." Danielle sipped cold coffee, her heart steady. "I've got a dozen teachers who've hinted at seeing similar things. Problem is, they're afraid to go on record." Marisol nodded. "Fear is their biggest weapon. But if we can get even 2 or 3 to testify, it changes everything." That evening, Rebecca Chen showed up at Danielle's door. She didn't say much at first, just handed over a flash drive. "It's every email I've kept from the last 3 years," Rebecca said. "Incidents, complaints, admin responses. Some of it will make your blood boil. Rebecca, this could cost you your job." Danielle said quietly. Rebecca gave a bitter smile. "After what they did to you, I'm not sure I want to work here much longer anyway." Danielle hugged her, the kind of hug that says, "I didn't expect this, but I needed it." The next step was Jamal. She and Marisol met him and his mother at a small coffee shop far from the school district. The teenager sat across from them, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, glancing around like someone might be watching. "You don't have to do this," Danielle told him gently. "I know it's a lot to ask." Jamal's mother put a hand on his arm. "We've talked about it, and we're in. If this keeps happening, it's not just him, it'll be someone else's kid next time." Jamal nodded. "I'll tell them what I heard, word for word, and I'll tell them how nothing happened to Tyler. Marisol smiled for the first time that day. Good. Because when a jury hears this, they won't see a misunderstanding. They'll see a school choosing comfort over justice. Over the next week, Danielle became part investigator, part organizer. She called parents after dinner. She met with teachers in parking lots. She dug through old board meeting minutes, highlighting every time the Grayson family's name appeared in connection with donations or special acknowledgments. She even tracked down a retired teacher who had left the district years ago. "They did the same thing to me," the woman said over the phone. "Different kid, same pattern. I didn't fight back. I wish I had." Danielle hung up feeling more certain than ever. This lawsuit wasn't just about her. It was about breaking something open that had been festering for years. One night, as she sat surrounded by papers, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drop it. Last warning." She showed it to Marisol the next morning. The attorney just shook her head. "Good. The more they try to intimidate you, the stronger our retaliation claim gets." Danielle almost smiled. For the first time since that day in room 114, she felt like she wasn't just reacting. She was moving forward on the attack, and the school had no idea what was coming. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where history lingered in the walls. Danielle sat at the plaintiff's table beside Marisol, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle, the school district's legal team, 3 sharp-suited attorneys, shuffled through their binders like they had already won. The judge, a tall man with silver hair and a voice that could cut through glass, called the room to order. Case number 2025-481, Danielle Morris versus Brookridge School District. It sounded official now. Unstoppable. Marisol began with an opening statement that felt like a blade wrapped in velvet. "This case is about truth," she told the jury. "About what happens when an educator stands up for a child in the face of blatant racism and is punished for it. The defendant will tell you this is about conduct and procedure, but by the end of this trial, you'll see what it's really about: power, protection, and the lengths some will go to silence what they don't want to hear." The district's lead attorney countered with a practiced calm. "This is not about race. This is about an employee who repeatedly defied directives, created unnecessary conflict, and failed to maintain the professional boundaries expected of a teacher." Danielle kept her eyes forward, but every word tightened the knot in her stomach. The first witness was Jamal. He walked to the stand in a pressed shirt and tie, his shoulders squared. When Marisol asked him to recount the incident, his voice was steady. "I was just listening to the book." Then Tyler said, "Of course Jamal likes this part. It's about his kind." Ms. Morris told him that wasn't okay. That was it. She didn't yell. She didn't embarrass him. She just said it wasn't okay. The district's attorney tried to poke holes. Could it have been a joke between classmates? Jamal didn't flinch. No, it wasn't a joke. When he stepped down, Danielle caught his eye and mouthed thank you. Then came Rebecca Chen. She testified about seeing similar behavior from Tyler in the past, and about the pressure from administration to keep things positive rather than report certain incidents. The real turning point came when Marisol called the retired teacher Danielle had tracked down. "I left because I was told to ignore the same kind of behavior, Ms. Morris reported," the woman said. "Different student, different year, same family name. And every time, the school found a way to make the teacher the problem." The courtroom was silent. Even the district's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. But the most damning moment arrived with an internal email chain Marisol entered into evidence. The jury watched as the clerk projected it onto the courtroom screen. From Dr. Henley to board members, we cannot allow this incident to become a racial issue. If necessary, reframe it as a matter of professionalism and safety. Gasps rippled through the room. Danielle's heart pounded. That single line, reframe it, stripped away every layer of the district's defense. By the time Marisol rested her case, Danielle could see it in the jurors' faces. They knew. When the verdict came, it was swift. Liability, yes. Retaliation, yes. Damages, substantial. But more than the money, it was the official recognition in black and white court records that mattered. Proof that the school's narrative had been a lie. Still, Danielle knew the fight wasn't over. The real test would be what happened when the public saw what had been buried for so long. The verdict hit the community like a shockwave. Within hours, local news stations were camped outside the courthouse. Danielle's face appeared on every evening broadcast, usually paired with the damning line from Dr. Henley's email, reframe it as a matter of professionalism and safety. Clips of Jamal's testimony went viral, stitched together with student protest footage and headlines reading, "Teacher fired for defending black student wins case against district." At Brookridge High, the ripple effects were immediate. Dr. Henley resigned to pursue other opportunities within a week, though the local paper reported she'd been pressured out by the board. Mr. Elson quietly transferred to another district, and for the first time in years, the Grayson family name wasn't splashed across the school's donor wall. The district announced new equity and accountability policies, mandatory anti-bias training for staff, a public reporting system for discrimination, and a formal commitment to protect whistleblowers. On paper, it was a transformation, but Danielle knew paper didn't change culture. People did. One afternoon, months after the trial, she returned to room 214. It was different now, brighter somehow. New posters on the wall, desks rearranged in a circle instead of rows. The young teacher who had taken over her classes greeted her warmly. "Some of the kids still talk about you," the new teacher said. "Especially Jamal." Danielle smiled, scanning the room. For a moment, she could almost hear her own voice reading from To Kill a Mockingbird. She met Jamal later that day at a small cafe. He was taller now, more confident, with college brochures sticking out of his backpack. "You changed things," he told her. "We changed things," she corrected. "You stood up, even when it was hard." He shrugged, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "Still hate that word, though." "What word?" "Resilient." Danielle laughed. "Good. You should. We're not here to survive the world the way it is. We're here to make it better." When she left the cafe, the sun was low, spilling gold across the street. She knew the district's wounds would heal unevenly. Some people would never forgive her for breaking the silence. Others would never forget that she'd done it. But somewhere, in classrooms she would never teach in, kids were learning that speaking up wasn't the end of the story. Sometimes, it was just the beginning.